Claire, leadership requires accountability. Ryan's voice was calm, controlled, almost bored. My presentation was still on the screen behind me. 3 months of work outlining the operational expansion plan. Everything I'd built, reduced to bullet points and charts. He clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. Operational failures under current leadership. My name was under it. There was a ripple in the room. Someone actually inhaled sharply. I felt my face freeze, my professional mask locked in place even as my stomach dropped. We can't scale with bottlenecks, he continued, gesturing at the screen like he was discussing quarterly projections. And unfortunately, that bottleneck has been Claire. My team was sitting in the second row. No one moved. No one spoke. Then he said it. Effective immediately, Claire Whitmore is no longer director of operations. Security was already by the door. 2 men in suits I'd seen 100 times in the lobby, now standing there for me. There was polite applause. Scattered. Uncomfortable. HR wouldn't look at me. I gathered my laptop slowly. My hands were steady even though my chest felt like it was caving in. As I walked past him, he leaned slightly toward the microphone. We wish her well. The room clapped again. And just like that, I was erased. I didn't remember getting to the elevator. I did remember standing in the parking garage, staring at my car like I'd forgotten how to open the door. The concrete walls felt like they were closing in. 5 years. 5 years of late nights, of building systems from scratch, of making Ryan look good in front of investors. Gone in 3 minutes. My phone vibrated in my hand. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Claire, a strained male voice said. This is Daniel from outside counsel. There's an issue. We need your signature immediately. I said nothing. My throat was too tight. For the acquisition documents, he continued, speaking faster now. The IP transfer papers. They need to be filed by end of day, or the deal stalls. I laughed. It sounded broken even to my own ears. You just watched me get fired, I said. A long pause. Yes, he said carefully. That's why this is complicated. I hung up. My phone immediately started ringing again. Daniel. Then an HR number. Then another I didn't recognize. I turned the phone off and drove home in complete silence. 5 years earlier, there were just 6 of us in a warehouse with folding tables and terrible coffee. Ryan had called me on a Thursday afternoon. We'd met at a startup mixer 3 months before, and he remembered I'd built compliance systems for tech companies. I can't afford a full-time operations director yet, he'd admitted. But I need someone who can build the foundation. Someone who understands regulations, logistics, scaling. He'd offered me a consulting contract. Decent pay. Equity options if the company made it past year 2. You'd basically be building everything, he said. Ground zero. I took the job. For 18 months, I worked 16-hour days. I built the entire logistics compliance system, created vendor relationships, established quality control protocols, hired the first operations team. Ryan used to call me the backbone. He'd say it in investor meetings, in all hands, in emails to the board. Claire's the reason we haven't collapsed yet, he'd joke. Back then, he said we were partners. Back then, I believed him. The company grew. We moved from the warehouse to a real office. Then to a bigger one. Revenue tripled. Then tripled again. Investors came. First angels, then a Series A, then a Series B that made headlines. Ryan changed. Magazine interviews. Podcast features. Panel discussions about visionary leadership. I became detail-oriented Claire in meetings. Where I used to sit next to Ryan during presentations, I was moved to the side. Then the back. Then I wasn't invited to certain meetings at all. Executive strategy sessions, his assistant would say apologetically. Ryan wants to keep them small. When I pushed back on risky expansion timelines that ignored compliance windows, he smiled and said, Don't be so rigid, Claire. We need to move fast. In meetings, I started getting interrupted. Ideas I'd proposed would be ignored, then repeated by someone else 10 minutes later and praised. I told myself it was growing pains. I should have recognized the shift then. I should have seen what was coming. 3 months before the firing, Ryan announced we were pursuing an acquisition. A logistics competitor, smaller but with interesting technology. The deal would triple our market presence overnight. He wanted to move fast. Close in 90 days. I spent 2 weeks reviewing their systems, their compliance records, their operational structure. Then I sent Ryan a detailed memo outlining the risks. Rushed integration would spike costs. Their safety protocols were outdated. Their vendor contracts had penalty clauses we'd inherit. We needed at least 6 months to do it right, maybe 9. He replied with 2 words. Noted. Proceed. I tried to schedule a meeting to discuss it. His calendar was always full. I sent follow-up emails. He responded with brief acknowledgments. The acquisition timeline didn't change. That memo became important later. But at the time, I just felt dismissed. The day after the firing, Ryan posted on LinkedIn. Leadership requires difficult decisions, he wrote. Growth demands agility. Sometimes the hardest choice is letting go of the past to embrace the future. The comments poured in within minutes. Bold move, Ryan. This is what strong CEO energy looks like. Onward and upward. I stared at my phone, reading it over and over. Then someone messaged me privately. A former colleague from another company. Just heard through the grapevine, she wrote. Ryan's telling people you resisted innovation. That you were blocking the acquisition progress. My stomach dropped. He wasn't just moving on. He was rewriting the narrative. Making me the villain in his success story. I checked Twitter. The company account had retweeted his post. I checked the company Slack. I still had access somehow. People were talking. Some defending me. Some silent. Some agreeing with Ryan's tough decisions framing. By evening, industry newsletters were picking it up. Startup shakes up leadership ahead of major acquisition. My name was buried in the 3rd paragraph. Ryan's was in the headline. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a thumb drive. No note. No return address. I plugged it into my laptop. It was a recording of the firing. Someone had filmed it on their phone. The whole thing. Ryan's calm voice. The slide with my name. Security by the door. My walk past him as the room clapped. I watched it 3 times. Then I noticed the timestamp. It had already been shared internally. Someone had posted it in a private Slack channel. The comments were split. This was brutal. She built everything. Ryan's losing people with stunts like this. But others wrote, sometimes you have to cut dead weight. Dead weight. I closed the laptop. That afternoon, Ryan posted again on LinkedIn. Removing obstacles to scale isn't easy, he wrote. But it's necessary. Obstacle. That's what I was now. Not the person who built his company. An obstacle. I met with an employment attorney the following Monday. Margaret Chin. Sharp, mid-50s, with a reputation for destroying unfair dismissal cases. Let me see everything, she said. Contracts, emails, documentation. I handed over my original consulting agreement from year 1. The full-time employment contract from year 3. Performance reviews. The acquisition memo. She read in silence for 40 minutes. Then she stopped. Claire, she said slowly, looking up. Did you ever sign a final IP transfer agreement? I blinked. What? She pointed to a clause in my original consulting contract. Intellectual property transfer contingent on final signature upon acquisition, merger, or valuation event exceeding $50 million. I stared at the words. That's standard for consultants who build proprietary systems, she explained. It protects you until there's a liquidity event, but it requires a formal transfer signature. I never signed anything like that, I said. Exactly. She leaned back. Which means legally, the compliance systems, the operational frameworks, anything you built during that consulting period, they can't transfer it without your authorization. My mouth went dry. The acquisition can't close without your signature? She smiled. Not legally. Not without risking the whole deal. Ryan called me directly that afternoon. No assistant. No warning. Claire, he said. No greeting. Let's be adults about this. Sign the paperwork. I'll authorize a severance package. Something reasonable. I gripped the phone. Why did you do it publicly? I asked quietly. Silence. The firing. Why in front of everyone? He exhaled. It was strategic. Clean break. No lingering questions. Strategic. That word made something inside me snap. You humiliated me, I said. I made a business decision, he replied coolly. Now I need you to make one. Sign the transfer. Move on. We both benefit. I'll think about it, I said. Don't take too long, he warned. This acquisition has a timeline. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. 2 days later, Daniel from legal asked me to meet with 2 board members. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. The board members, Catherine and James, looked uncomfortable. Claire, Catherine began carefully, we want to resolve this amicably. Did you know about the IP clause? I asked directly. They exchanged glances. No, James admitted. We assumed your role had been fully transitioned when you moved from consultant to full-time employee. Ryan assured us everything was documented, Catherine added. I almost laughed. So he fired me without checking if it would destroy his acquisition? Ryan handled the optics, James said quietly. We're handling the legalities now. Optics. That's what my humiliation was. A photo opportunity for Ryan's leadership brand. We'd like to offer you a consulting fee, Catherine continued. For the signature. Something substantial. How substantial? I asked. She named a number. It was insulting. That's what you think my 5 years are worth. I said. It's what we can authorize quickly, James said. We're trying to find middle ground. There is no middle ground, I replied. I built your foundation. Ryan destroyed my reputation. And now you want me to save his deal for pocket change. I stood up. I'll consider my options, I said. You should too. Margaret called me that evening with news. I found something else, she said. Her voice was tight. What? The acquisition payout structure. There's an executive equity distribution clause. Anyone employed at director level or above gets a percentage. Okay, I said slowly. Your termination date was May 15th, she continued. The vesting eligibility date for the acquisition payout is May 22nd. The words took a moment to land. 1 week, I whispered. 1 week before you would have been eligible for equity distribution worth approximately $700,000. My vision blurred. It wasn't impulsive, Margaret said. The timing was deliberate. He fired you exactly when it would deny you the payout. I couldn't speak. Claire? Are you there? Yes, I managed. That betrayal hit harder than the public firing. He hadn't just removed me. He'd calculated it. 3 days later, Ryan gave an interview to Tech Founder, a popular startup blog. The headline, Scaling Beyond Operational Constraint, How One CEO Made the Hard Call. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Sometimes you inherit structures that worked at 10 employees but fail at 100, he said in the interview. You have to be willing to transition from operational constraint to visionary scale. The comments section filled quickly. Love this honest take on growth. Too many founders get stuck with early hires who can't adapt. Anyone know who he's talking about? Someone replied, Claire Whitmore. Saw the video. Another comment. She seemed too corporate for a startup. I closed the browser. My phone buzzed. A text from my former team lead. I'm sorry. This is unfair. People know the truth. But the public story was already written. And Ryan was the one holding the pen. The following Monday, an investor emailed the board with concerns. Someone forwarded it to me anonymously. Given the recent leadership instability and public controversy surrounding the operations director's departure, we'd like confirmation that all IP transfers are secured before the acquisition closes. The acquisition partner sent a similar request directly to legal. Ryan assured everyone it was purely administrative. It wasn't. Daniel from legal called me again. Claire, the timeline is getting critical, he said. We need that signature. I haven't decided yet, I replied. The board is willing to negotiate, he pressed. What would it take? An apology would be a start, I said. Silence. I'll relay that, he said carefully. No apology came. Just another formal letter requesting my signature, this time with a slightly larger severance offer. Still insulting. I didn't respond. Former co-workers started texting me privately. Claire, are you okay? We're hearing rumors about layoffs if the deal falls through. People are scared. The guilt crept in slowly, then all at once. If I didn't sign, the acquisition could collapse. Jobs could be lost. People I'd hired, trained, mentored, they'd suffer. I called Margaret. They're putting pressure on me through my former team, I told her, making me feel responsible for what happens next. Claire, she said firmly, you didn't create this situation. Ryan did when he fired you without doing his legal homework. Don't let them manipulate you with guilt. But real people will be hurt, I said. Real people were hurt when he publicly humiliated you, she countered. When he timed your firing to steal your equity. When he smeared your reputation. Where was his concern then? She was right, but it didn't make the guilt disappear. Ryan hosted another all-hands meeting. Someone recorded it and sent me the audio. We're in a critical growth phase, he told the company. Some people can't handle that pressure. Former leadership slowed our innovation velocity. We needed to make changes. Former leadership. He wouldn't even say my name. Employees messaged me afterward. Morale is terrible. People are asking questions. The narrative is cracking. One message stood out. From Marcus, a senior manager I'd hired 3 years ago. Half the team knows this is garbage, he wrote. We're documenting everything. If you need support, you have it. That message mattered more than any legal strategy. On a Wednesday afternoon, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. Claire Whitmore? I'm Sarah Vance, COO at Meridian Logistics. I saw what happened. We've been watching your work for years. Would you be open to a conversation? Meridian Logistics was a competitor. Bigger, more established, better funded. I almost declined. Then I thought about Ryan's smug interview. His strategic humiliation. His calculated theft of my equity. I accepted the meeting. The acquisition deadline was 10 days away. Daniel called me again. This time his voice was strained. Claire, the board has been informed that without your signature, we cannot legally transfer the IP. The deal partner is threatening to walk. That sounds like a Ryan problem, I said calmly. It's a company problem, he corrected. People's jobs are at stake. Then maybe Ryan should have thought about that before firing me on stage, I replied. Silence. The board wants to schedule another meeting, he finally said. Tell them to send a formal proposal, I said. In writing, with specific terms. I hung up before he could respond. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Ryan called me again that evening. His tone had shifted. Claire, you're being unreasonable, he said. You're hurting the company. People you claim to care about. I'm not the one who created this situation, I replied evenly. You're the one prolonging it, he shot back. Out of what? Spite. Revenge. Accountability, I said. Something you mentioned in that meeting before you fired me. This is bigger than your ego, he said. Then treat it that way, I replied. Publicly admit you made a mistake. Apologize. Restore my equity eligibility. Then we'll talk about signatures. He was quiet for a long moment. That's not happening, he finally said. Then neither is my signature, I replied. He hung up first. The next morning, senior managers pushed back against Ryan's narrative. Marcus sent me a screenshot of an internal Slack thread where 3 directors questioned the operational bottleneck story. Claire built our entire compliance framework, one wrote. Calling her a bottleneck is revisionist history. The firing video resurfaced on industry Twitter. This time with context. Timeline comparisons showing my track record versus Ryan's claims. Investors were watching now. The board scheduled an emergency session. Ryan sent me one final aggressive email. Sign by Friday or face legal action for breach of contract and intentional interference with business operations. I forwarded it to Margaret. She called me immediately, laughing. He has no legal standing, she said. This is desperation. He's losing control. Should I respond? I asked. Absolutely not, she said. Let him spiral. Friday came and went. I didn't sign. The following Monday, the acquisition officially stalled. The partner company issued a statement citing unresolved operational IP transfers. The startup's stock value, still private but tracked by investors, dropped 18%. Investors demanded accountability. Someone leaked internal emails showing Ryan had ignored warnings about the IP clause. The board called another emergency meeting. This time, Ryan wasn't invited. 2 board members called me directly. Catherine and James again. Their tone was different now. Careful. Almost apologetic. Claire, we've initiated a leadership review, Catherine said. We recognize mistakes were made. What are you asking? I said. What would it take to resolve this? James asked. Genuinely. What do you need? For the first time, I felt the shift. Power had moved. Full public acknowledgement of my contributions, I said. Restoration of equity eligibility. A formal apology from Ryan. And a seat at the table for however long I choose to stay. We can make that happen, Catherine said quickly. And Ryan? I asked. They exchanged a glance I couldn't see but could feel through the phone. That's being addressed, James said carefully. 3 days later, Ryan stepped down to pursue new opportunities. No applause this time. No all-hands meeting. No LinkedIn post about bold leadership. Just a quiet press release buried on a Wednesday afternoon. The board reached out again with a formal offer. Director of Operations reinstated. Expanded authority. Full equity restoration with retroactive vesting. Public acknowledgement of my role in building the company. They were careful now. Respectful. Professional. I read the offer twice. Then I thanked them politely. and declined, because 3 days earlier, I'd signed a different contract. Sarah Vance from Meridian Logistics had made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Vice President of Strategic Operations, significant equity, full operational authority, and something more valuable than any title, respect. "We've watched what Ryan did," Sarah had said during our final meeting. "It was short-sighted and cruel. We don't operate that way." I'd signed that morning. As I packed up my apartment that evening, preparing for the move to Meridian's headquarters, my phone buzzed. News alert. Meridian Logistics acquires tech venture assets in surprise move. I opened the article. Meridian had purchased the acquisition target Ryan had been chasing, the logistics competitor with the interesting technology. But they'd bought it outright, cutting Ryan's company out entirely. Strategic acquisition to enhance operational capabilities, the press release stated. Led by newly appointed VP of Strategic Operations, Claire Whitmore. I set my phone down, smiling. 5 years ago, I built something from nothing in a warehouse with folding tables. I'd believed in partnership, in loyalty, in working hard and being rewarded fairly. Ryan taught me those were just words people used when they needed you. But he also taught me something more valuable. I didn't need his company to prove my worth. The systems I built, the frameworks I created, the expertise I developed, those belonged to me. Not him. Not his board. Not his narrative. 3 months into my role at Meridian, I stood in a glass conference room overlooking the city, leading a presentation on operational integration. My team sat in the front row. Engaged. Respected. Heard. No one interrupted me. No one called me a bottleneck. No one questioned my authority. After the meeting, Sarah approached me. "That was excellent," she said. "You're exactly what we needed." I smiled. Not because of revenge. Not because Ryan's company was struggling without the acquisition, but because I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all along. A place where competence mattered more than ego. Where partnership was real, not performative. Where I didn't have to beg for respect. Ryan called me an obstacle. Turned out, I was just standing in the way of his incompetence. And once I stepped aside, he collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance. While I built something better. Somewhere I actually belonged.